Why did the hospital patient keep ringing the call button? Because she wanted to see if the nurse had any patients left. Today I'm sharing the incredible story of Maya Rodriguez, a woman whose past came back to save her future in the most unexpected way. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya Rodriguez had spent the last 3 years trying to forget who she used to be. Standing in the employee parking lot of St. Catherine's Medical Center at 5:47 a.m., she adjusted her brand new navy blue scrubs and took a deep breath. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of antiseptic and fresh coffee from the hospital cafeteria. Her hands, once wrapped in boxing tape and gloves, now trembled slightly as she clutched her employee badge. The transformation hadn't been easy. 3 years ago, Maya "Lightning" Rodriguez was ranked 4th in the women's welterweight division, with a record of 23 wins and only 2 losses. She'd been training for the biggest fight of her career when everything fell apart. Her younger brother Carlos had been diagnosed with leukemia, and Maya made a choice that shocked the boxing world. She walked away from a $1 million championship bout to become his full-time caregiver during those long nights in hospital. Waiting rooms, watching nurses work tirelessly to save lives, Maya found her new calling. She enrolled in nursing school while Carlos underwent treatment, studying medical textbooks between chemotherapy sessions. When Carlos finally went into remission, Maya graduated summa cum laude and was ready to start fresh at St. Catherine's. The hospital's emergency department was known for being one of the most demanding in the city. Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, the chief of emergency medicine, had personally recruited Maya after being impressed by her clinical rotations. What Dr. Hayes didn't know was that Maya's ability to stay calm under pressure came from years of facing opponents who wanted to knock her unconscious dot. As Maya walked through the automatic doors, she was greeted by the familiar chaos of morning. Shift change. The emergency department hummed with activity. Paramedics wheeling in patients, doctors reviewing charts, and the constant beeping of monitors. She reported to the nurses' station where Sandra Mitchell, the day shift supervisor, waited with a clipboard and a stern expression. Sandra was a 20-year veteran of the department, known for her no-nonsense attitude and her ability to spot weakness in new hires. She looked Maya up and down, taking in her perfectly pressed scrubs and nervous energy. "So you're the new girl," Sandra said, not bothering to look up from her paperwork. "I hope you're tougher than you look. We don't have time for hand-holding." "Here," Maya nodded respectfully. "I'm ready to learn, ma'am." "We'll see about that. You're assigned to Trauma Bay 3 today. Try not to get in the way." As Maya made her way to her assigned area, she couldn't help but notice the hostile glances from some of the other nurses. Rebecca Carter, a blonde woman in her 30s, whispered something to her colleague Jennifer Walsh, causing both women to snicker. Maya had encountered workplace politics before, but something about the atmosphere here felt different, more predatory. The morning started smoothly enough. Maya's first patient was an elderly man with chest pains who turned out to be having an anxiety attack. Her gentle bedside manner and thorough assessment impressed Dr. Marcus Thompson, the attending physician. "Nice work, Rodriguez," he said quietly as they stepped away from the patient. "Keep that up and you'll do fine here." But Maya's competence seemed to irritate rather than impress certain members of the nursing staff. During lunch break, she overheard Rebecca talking loudly near the vending machines. "Did you see how she was trying to show off with that chest pain case? Acting like she knows everything on her first day," Rebecca scoffed. "Probably thinks she's better than us because she went to some fancy nursing school," Jennifer added, deliberately. Speaking loud enough for Maya to hear, Maya kept her head down and focused on her sandwich. Remembering her brother's words, "The best revenge is proving them wrong with your actions, not your fists." The afternoon brought a rush of trauma cases. A multi-car accident had sent 5 patients to their department, and Maya found herself assisting with a complex procedure on a teenager with internal bleeding. Her hands moved with steady precision, anticipating Dr. Hayes' needs before she even asked. "Excellent work, Rodriguez," Dr. Hayes said as they stabilized the patient. "You've got good instincts." This praise caught the attention of Rebecca and her group, who had been watching from across the department. Maya could see the jealousy in their eyes, but she pushed the feeling aside. She had work to do. As evening approached, Maya was restocking supplies in the storage room when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to find Rebecca, Jennifer, and two other nurses, Amanda Foster and Lisa Chun, blocking the doorway. Well, Rebecca said, crossing her arms. "Look who thinks she's the star of the show." "I'm just doing my job," Maya replied calmly, continuing to organize supplies. "Your job?" Jennifer laughed harshly. "You mean kissing up to the doctors and making the rest of us look bad?" Maya set down the gauze she was holding and faced them. "I'm not trying to make anyone look bad. I'm here to help patients." "Right," Amanda sneered. Miss Perfect with her fancy education and her goody two-shoes act. The women moved closer, forming a semicircle around Maya. She recognized the body language. She'd seen it countless times. In the boxing gym when someone was about to throw a punch. But this wasn't a boxing ring, and these weren't professional fighters. These were her colleagues, and she needed this job. "Listen," Maya said, keeping her voice steady. "I don't want any trouble. I just want to do good work and help people." "Oh, you don't want trouble?" Rebecca stepped forward, her voice dripping with mock concern. "That's too bad, because trouble found you." Before Maya could react, Rebecca grabbed the front of her scrub top and gave it a sharp yank. The fabric tore slightly, and Maya instinctively stepped back. The other nurses laughed, emboldened by their leader's aggression. "Oops," Rebecca said with fake innocence. "Looks like your pretty uniform got damaged. Maybe you should go home and change." Maya's muscles tensed, years of training screaming at her to defend herself. Her hands wanted to form fists, to show these bullies what happened when you cornered a fighter. But she forced herself to remain still, thinking of Carlos, of her new career, of all the patients who needed her help. "That's enough," Maya said firmly. "I'm going back to work." She tried to move past them, but Jennifer blocked her path. "Not so fast, Princess. We're not done with you yet." The storage room suddenly felt smaller, the walls closing in. Maya's breathing remained controlled, but her heart rate increased. She was trapped, surrounded by 4 hostile women who clearly had no intention of letting her leave peacefully. "You think you can just waltz in here and take over?" Lisa spoke for the first time, her voice cold. "We've been here for years, paying our dues." "And you," Amanda added, pointing an accusing finger at Maya, "with your perfect grades and your perfect attitude, you think you're better than us." Maya realized that reasoning with them was pointless. These women had already made up their minds about her, and nothing she said would change their perception. She was the outsider, the threat to their established order, and they intended to put her in her place. The confrontation escalated when Rebecca reached out and grabbed Maya's badge, yanking it hard enough to snap the lanyard. "Maybe if you didn't have this, you'd have to leave," she taunted. Maya's patience was wearing thin. Every instinct told her to fight back, to show these bullies that she wasn't an easy target. But she also knew that one wrong move could end her nursing career before it really began. "Give me back my badge," Maya said, her voice carrying a new edge that made the women pause momentarily. "Or what?" Rebecca challenged, dangling the badge just out of reach. "What are you going to do about it?" The question hung in the air like a challenge thrown down in a boxing ring. Maya stood perfectly still, her mind racing through options while her body prepared for whatever came next. She had tried to avoid conflict, had tried to be the professional her brother would be proud of. But sometimes, even the most patient person reaches their breaking point. In the distance, She could hear the sounds of the emergency department continuing its vital work, monitors beeping, doctors calling out orders, the constant hum of people fighting to save lives. This was her world now, her chance to make a difference. And she wasn't going to let 4 bullies take that away from her. The storage room fell silent except for the sound of 5 women breathing, each waiting to see who would make the next move. Maya's hands remained at her sides, but her stance had subtly shifted, weight balanced on the balls of her feet. Years of training had taught her to read opponents, to anticipate their moves, and right now, she could see that Rebecca was about to escalate things beyond the point of no return. Calm before the storm stretched on, tension building like pressure in a boiler. Maya had come to St. Catherine's to start over, to use her skills to heal instead of hurt. But sometimes, the past is a way of demanding its due. And Maya Rodriguez was about to discover that you can take the fighter out of the ring, but you can't take the fight out of the fighter. Rebecca's grip tightened on Maya's badge, her knuckles white with tension. The storage room had become a powder keg, and Maya could feel the familiar surge of adrenaline that had once carried her through championship rounds. But this wasn't Madison Square Garden, and these weren't professional opponents who understood the rules of engagement. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. You know what I think? Rebecca continued, stepping closer until she was inches from Maya's face. I think you're nothing but a fraud. All that education, all that training, and you can't even stand up for yourself. Maya's jaw clenched. In the boxing ring, psychological warfare was part of the game. Opponents would try to get under your skin, make you angry, force you to make mistakes. But Rebecca wasn't a trained fighter. She was just a bully drunk on power. And that made her dangerous in a different way. Last chance, Maya said quietly. Give me my badge and walk away. Jennifer laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the supply shelves. Oh, she's getting tough now. What are you going to do? Report us to HR? Good luck with that, sweetheart. We've got friends in administration. Amanda moved to Maya's left while Lisa positioned herself on the right. They were trying to box her in, but their amateur intimidation tactics were clumsy compared to the sophisticated footwork Maya had faced in the ring. She could see every opening, every weakness in their formation. You want to know why we don't? Like you? Rebecca's voice dropped to a venomous whisper. It's because you think you're special. You think you can just show up here and replace us. I'm not trying to replace anyone, Maya replied, but her words fell on deaf ears. Sure you're not, Jennifer sneered. That's why you were showing off. All day, impressing the doctors, making us look incompetent. Maya realized that her competence itself was being seen as an attack. These women had built their identities around being adequate, and her excellence threatened their comfortable mediocrity. In the boxing world, you respected skill even in your opponents. Here, skill was seen as betrayal. The situation escalated. When Rebecca suddenly grabbed the front of Maya's scrub top with both hands and yanked hard, the fabric tore with a loud ripping sound, exposing Maya's undershirt and leaving her standing in shredded uniform pieces. Oops, Rebecca said with mock innocence. Looks like your first day isn't going so well. The other nurses erupted in laughter. But Maya remained perfectly still. Her breathing was controlled, her stance balanced. She had learned long ago that the moment before a fight was crucial. It was when you decided whether you were predator or prey. That uniform cost me $60, Maya said calmly. And? Amanda taunted. What are you going to do about it? Cried Amami. Maya's hands slowly rose, but not in the way the bullies expected. Instead of forming fists, she began methodically rolling up her sleeves. The movement was deliberate, professional, like a surgeon preparing for an operation. I'm going to ask you one more time, Maya said, her voice carrying a new authority. Step aside and let me leave. Rebecca laughed and shoved Maya backwards into the supply shelf. Boxes of gloves and bandages scattered to the floor, and Maya's patient mask finally slipped. Years of disciplined training had taught her to control her emotions, but everyone had a breaking point. "You made a mistake," Maya said, her voice eerily calm. "Oh yeah?" Rebecca moved closer, emboldened by her colleague's encouragement. "And what's that?" Maya's response was swift and decisive. Her left hand shot out in a perfect jab, connecting with Rebecca's solar plexus. The bully doubled over, gasping for air, as Maya smoothly sidestepped and faced the other three women. "The mistake," Maya said, "was thinking I wouldn't fight back." Jennifer charged forward with a wild swing, but Maya ducked under it effortlessly. Her right uppercut caught Jennifer under the chin, lifting her off her feet before she crumpled to the ground. 2 down, 2 to go. Amanda and Lisa hesitated, suddenly realizing they were dealing with someone far more dangerous than they had anticipated. But pride and peer pressure drove them forward. Amanda grabbed Maya's hair, but Maya caught her wrist and twisted it behind her back in a move she'd learned from her self-defense training. A quick hip toss sent Amanda crashing into a cart of medical supplies. Lisa, the smallest of the group, tried to run for the door, but Maya's footwork was too good. She cut off the escape route and delivered a precise body shot that dropped Lisa to her knees. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 30 seconds. 4 bullies lay groaning on the storage room floor while Maya stood over them, her breathing barely elevated. Her torn scrubs hung in tatters, but her expression remained professional. "I tried to do this the peaceful way," Maya said, looking down at the defeated women, "but you wouldn't listen." Rebecca, still clutching her stomach, looked up at Maya with a mixture of fear and hatred. "You single quotes redot. You're insane," she wheezed. "No," Maya replied, picking up her badge from where Rebecca had dropped it. "I'm just someone who knows how to handle bullies." The sound of footsteps in the hallway made Maya quickly assess the situation. 4 injured nurses would be hard to explain, and she needed to get ahead of the story. She helped Rebecca to her feet, her touch surprisingly gentle. "Here's what's going to happen," Maya said quietly. "You're going to tell anyone who asks that you slipped and fell while moving supplies. All of you. Why would we do that?" Amanda groaned from the floor. Maya smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Because the alternative is me explaining to the administration how 4 senior nurses cornered a new employee in a storage room and destroyed her uniform. How do you think that's going to look on your permanent records?" The bullies exchanged glances. They had planned to intimidate Maya, but the tables had turned completely. Now they were the ones who needed to worry about their careers. "You can't prove anything," Jennifer said weakly. Maya pointed to a small security camera in the corner of the room that they had all forgotten about. "Actually, I can. Everything that happened here is recorded. The question is whether we handle this quietly or whether I have to involve security." Rebecca's face went pale. A formal investigation would reveal their pattern of bullying behavior. And Maya wasn't their first victim. Other nurses had complained about the group's toxic behavior, but no one had ever been able to prove anything. "What do you want?" Rebecca asked, defeat clear in her voice. "I want to do my job," Maya said simply. "I want to help patients and work alongside professionals who respect each other. Can you handle that?" The 4 women nodded reluctantly. They had learned a hard lesson about underestimating people, and Maya had established herself as someone who couldn't be pushed around. As Maya prepared to leave the storage room, she paused at the door. "One more thing," she said without turning around. "If you ever try something like this again, with me or anyone else, you'll discover that what just happened was me being gentle." She stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind her. The emergency department continued its vital work, unaware of the drama that had just unfolded. Maya walked calmly to the nearest bathroom to assess the damage to her uniform and plan her next move. Looking at herself in the mirror, Maya saw someone who had changed. The meek, eager-to-please new nurse was gone, replaced by someone who understood her own strength. She had tried to leave her fighting days behind, but sometimes the past serves a purpose in the present. Her phone buzzed with a text from Carlos. "How's the first day going, sis? Making friends?" Maya smiled as she typed back, something like that. "I think I'm going to fit in just fine." She spent the next few minutes repairing her torn scrubs as best she could, using safety pins from the first aid kit to hold the fabric together. It wasn't pretty, but it would get her through the rest of her shift. When Maya returned to the emergency department, she noticed the immediate change in atmosphere. Word had somehow spread about the incident, though the details remained vague. Nurses who had ignored her all day now nodded respectfully as she passed. Dr. Hayes approached her at the nurse's station. "Rodriguez, is everything all right? I heard there was some kind of accident in the storage room." "Just a minor incident while moving supplies," Maya replied smoothly. "Nothing to worry about." Dr. Hayes studied her for a moment, taking in the makeshift. "Repairs to her uniform. I see. Well, if you need a new set of scrubs, we keep extras in the locker room." "Thank you, Dr. Hayes. I'll take care of it." As the evening progressed, Maya found herself working alongside nurses who had previously been hostile. Rebecca and her group were notably subdued, focusing on their work and avoiding eye contact. The toxic atmosphere that had dominated the department seemed to have lifted, replaced by a more professional environment. During a brief break, Maya sat in the break room and reflected on the day's events. She had come to St. Catherine's hoping to start fresh, to leave her fighting past behind. But perhaps trying to completely separate herself from who she used to be had been a mistake. Her boxing skills weren't just about violence. They were about discipline, strategy, and standing up for what was right. Those qualities had made her a champion in the ring, and they could make her a champion in the hospital too. 3 weeks had passed since the storage room incident, and Maya had settled into a routine at St. Catherine's that felt almost normal. The hostile atmosphere had evaporated, replaced by a grudging respect from her colleagues. Rebecca and her group maintained a professional distance, speaking to Maya only when necessary for patient care. It wasn't friendship, but it was workable. Maya had purchased new scrubs and established herself as one of the most competent nurses in the emergency department. Dr. Hayes had begun assigning her to the most critical cases, and her calm demeanor under pressure had earned praise from patients and doctors alike. But Maya knew that her newfound peace was fragile, built on a foundation of fear rather than genuine respect. The morning shift started like any other, until paramedics rushed in with a trauma case that would test everyone's limits. A construction worker named Danny Morrison had fallen 3 stories, suffering massive internal injuries and a traumatic brain injury. Dr. Thompson and Maya worked frantically to stabilize him while his wife Sarah waited in agony outside the trauma bay. "BP is dropping fast," Maya called out, adjusting the 4-drip. Heart rate climbing to 140 inches. Dr. Thompson's face was grim as he examined the patient's pupils. "We're losing him. Get me 2 units of O-negative and call surgery stat." Maya moved. With practiced efficiency, her hands steady despite the chaos around her. She had learned that in moments like these, emotion was a luxury they couldn't afford. Danny Morrison's life hung in the balance, and everything else became secondary. As they worked, Maya noticed Rebecca watching from across the department. There was something different in her expression, not the usual resentment, but a calculating look that made Maya uneasy. Rebecca whispered something to Jennifer, who immediately began moving toward the trauma bay. "Maya, I need you to prep the crash cart," Dr. Thompson ordered as Danny's heart monitor began showing dangerous arrhythmias. Maya was reaching for the defibrillator when Jennifer suddenly appeared at her elbow. "I'll handle that," she said, attempting to take over. "I've got it," Maya replied firmly, not breaking her concentration. "Dr. Thompson asked me to take over," Jennifer insisted, her voice carrying just enough authority to create confusion in the heat of the moment. Maya paused, looking between Jennifer and the patient. In that split second of hesitation, Danny Morrison went into cardiac arrest. The monitor's shrill alarm filled the trauma bay as his heart flatlined. "What's the holdup?" Dr. Thompson shouted, turning from the patient to see Maya and Jennifer struggling over the defibrillator. "She won't let me help," Jennifer said with practiced innocence. Maya realized she was being set up. Jennifer was trying to make her look incompetent during a critical moment, potentially costing a patient his life. The old Maya might have backed down, but 3 weeks of hard-won respect had changed her. "Step aside," Maya said coldly, using her shoulder to move Jennifer out of the way. She quickly charged the defibrillator and positioned the paddles on Danny's chest. "Clear," she called out, delivering the shock that brought Danny's heart back into rhythm. Dr. Thompson shot her an approving nod before returning his attention to the patient. "Good work, Rodriguez. Jennifer, get back to your assigned station." As the trauma team continued working to save Danny's life, Maya caught Rebecca's eye across the room. The blonde nurse's expression was pure venom, and Maya realized that the storage room incident hadn't ended their conflict. It had only forced it underground. The surgery team arrived and wheeled Danny away, leaving Maya to clean up the trauma bay. She was disposing of medical waste when Sandra Mitchell approached, her supervisor's expression unreadable. "Rodriguez, I need to see you in my office," Sandra said curtly. Maya's stomach dropped. She followed Sandra through the maze of hospital corridors, wondering if Jennifer had already reported some fabricated version of events. In the small office overlooking the emergency department, Sandra closed the door and gestured for Maya to sit. "I've been getting reports about you," Sandra began, consulting a file on her desk. "What kind of reports?" Maya asked, keeping her voice steady. "Some of the senior nurses have expressed concerns about your attitude. They say you're not a team player, that you're aggressive and difficult to work with." Maya felt a surge of anger, but forced herself to remain calm. "Can you be more specific about these concerns?" Sandra flipped through several pages. "Rebecca Carter submitted a formal complaint yesterday, claiming you physically threatened her in the storage room 3 weeks ago. Jennifer Walsh has corroborated the story, saying you've been hostile and confrontational ever since you started here." Maya realized that Rebecca had been planning this move all along. Unable to intimidate her physically, the bullies had decided to attack her professionally. It was a more sophisticated form of warfare, and potentially more damaging. "Did anyone mention what happened before this alleged threatening behavior?" Maya asked. "What do you mean?" Maya chose her words carefully. "I mean, did anyone mention that these same nurses cornered me in the storage room, destroyed my uniform, and physically assaulted me first?" Sandra's expression didn't change. "There's no record of that incident. No formal complaint was filed. Because I chose to handle it quietly. I thought it was better to move forward professionally." "Well, that may have been a mistake," Sandra said, closing the file. "I'm placing you on administrative review pending a full investigation. You'll be suspended with pay for 1 week while we sort this out." Maya felt the walls closing in. She had worked too hard to get to this point, to let Rebecca's lies destroy her career. "This is about the storage room incident, isn't it? They're retaliating because I stood up for myself." "I don't know what happened in that storage room," Sandra replied, "but I do know that 4 senior nurses with spotless records have made serious allegations against you. That's something I have to take seriously." Maya stood up, her mind racing. She needed to find a way to prove her innocence, but it was her word against 4 seasoned employees who had already coordinated their stories. "I understand," Maya said. "Finally, when does the suspension start?" "Immediately. Security will escort you out, and you'll surrender your badge and access cards." The walk through the emergency department felt like a perp walk. Maya could feel the eyes of her colleagues following her as two security guards flanked her path to the exit. Some looked sympathetic. Others seemed to believe she had finally shown her true colors. As they passed the nurse's station, Maya caught sight of Rebecca watching with barely concealed satisfaction. The blonde nurse had played her cards perfectly, using the system against Maya in a way that was more devastating than any physical confrontation. Outside in the parking lot, Maya sat in her car and called the one person who would understand her situation. Carlos answered on the second ring. "Maya, shouldn't you be at work?" "I've been suspended," she said, explaining the situation as tears of frustration threatened to spill over. "Those lying," Carlos started, then caught himself. "I'm sorry, sis. This is exactly the kind of politics I was worried about when you left boxing." "Maybe I should have stayed in the ring," Maya said bitterly. "At least there, when someone tried to destroy you, they had the guts to do it to your face." "Hey," Carlos said firmly, "you didn't quit boxing to hide from fights. You quit to help people. Don't let these bullies take that away from you." Maya wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. Carlos was right. She hadn't survived years in professional boxing by backing down from adversity. This was just a different kind of fight, one that required strategy rather than strength. "You're right," she said. "I need to think about this like a boxing match. They got in a good shot, but the fight's not over." After hanging up, Maya drove home to her small apartment and began planning her counterattack. She had 1 week to prove her innocence, and she intended to use every day of it. The security camera footage from the storage room would be her best evidence, but she needed to find a way to access it without violating hospital policy. Maya spent the evening researching hospital protocols and employment law. She discovered that as an employee under investigation, she had the right to review any evidence being used against her, including security footage. She also learned that St. Catherine's had a zero-tolerance policy for workplace harassment, something that could work in her favor if she could prove her case. The next morning, Maya called the hospital's Human Resources Department and requested a formal meeting to discuss her suspension. She was transferred to Janet Williams, the HR director, who agreed to see her that afternoon. Janet Williams was a middle-aged woman with graying hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. Her office was filled with certificates and policy manuals, creating an atmosphere of bureaucratic authority. "Ms. Rodriguez," Janet said, reviewing Maya's file, "I understand you wanted to discuss your suspension. I want to request access to the security footage from the storage room incident 3 weeks ago." Maya said directly. Janet looked surprised. "What storage room incident?" Maya felt a spark of hope. "The incident that Rebecca Carter and her colleagues are claiming never happened. I was assaulted by 4 nurses who destroyed my uniform and threatened me. It should all be on the security cameras." Janet made notes on a legal pad. "This is the first I'm hearing about any assault. Can you provide specific details about when and where this occurred?" Maya gave Janet a complete account of the storage room confrontation, including the exact time and location. As she spoke, Janet's expression grew increasingly serious. "If what you're telling me is true," Janet said, "then we have a much bigger problem than one nurse with attitude issues. We have a pattern of harassment and retaliation that violates multiple hospital policies." Maya felt vindicated but remained cautious. "Will you review the security footage?" "Absolutely. And I'll be conducting a full investigation into these allegations. If Rebecca Carter and her colleagues have been filing false reports to cover up their own misconduct, there will be serious consequences." As Maya left the HR office, she felt a renewed sense of hope. The truth had a way of surfacing, even when people tried to bury it. Rebecca and her allies had made a critical mistake by putting their lies in writing. Now there was a paper trail that could be challenged and investigated. The real fight was just beginning, but Maya had faced longer odds in the boxing ring. This time, She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every future employee who might face the same harassment. It was a fight worth winning, and Maya Rodriguez had never backed down from a fight worth winning. The next 3 days passed in agonizing, slow motion for Maya. She had filed her formal request for the security footage and submitted a detailed, written statement to HR, but the bureaucratic wheels of St. Catherine's moved at their own pace. Maya spent her forced time off researching employment law, documenting every interaction she could remember, and preparing for what she hoped would be her vindication. On Thursday morning, her phone rang with an unknown number. When she answered, a familiar voice caught her off guard. Maya Rodriguez? This is Dr. Elena Vasquez from St. Mary's Hospital across town. I heard you might be looking for a new position. Maya's heart sank. Word of her suspension had already reached other hospitals in the city. Dr. Vasquez, I can explain. No need. Dr. Vasquez interrupted. I've worked with Rebecca Carter before. She transferred from our emergency department 2 years ago after similar allegations were made against her. We couldn't prove anything then, but I've always wondered what really happened. Maya felt a surge of hope. Similar allegations? 3. Different nurses filed complaints about harassment and intimidation. Each time, Rebecca had witnesses to support her version of events. Each time, the accusers either withdrew their complaints or left the hospital entirely. This was the break Maya had been hoping for. Would you be willing to share this information with St. Catherine's HR department? I've already spoken with Janet Williams, Dr. Vasquez said. She reached out to several hospitals as part of her investigation. It seems Rebecca's pattern of behavior is more extensive than anyone realized. Maya felt vindicated, but also angry that the hospital had hired Rebecca without properly checking her background. Thank you for calling, Dr. Vasquez. This means everything to me. One more thing, Dr. Vasquez added. If things don't work out at St. Catherine's, we have an opening in our trauma unit. Your clinical instructor spoke very highly of your skills. After hanging up, Maya felt energized for the first time since her suspension began. The web of lies Rebecca had constructed was beginning to unravel, and Maya wasn't the only person who had seen through her manipulative behavior. Friday afternoon, Janet Williams called with an update that changed everything. Ms. Rodriguez, I need you to come in for a meeting on Monday morning at 9 a.m. We've completed our review of the security footage, and there are some things we need to discuss. Maya's pulse quickened. Can you tell me what you found? I'd prefer to discuss it in person. Please bring a witness or representative if you'd like. This meeting will determine the outcome of our investigation. Maya spent the weekend in nervous anticipation. She called Carlos, who immediately offered to drive down from their hometown to support her, but Maya declined. This was her fight, and she needed to see it through alone. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching Maya's anxious mood. She dressed in her best professional attire and arrived at the hospital 30 minutes early, using the time to center herself in the parking lot. The meditation technique she'd learned from her boxing coach helped calm her nerves. Janet Williams' office was crowded when Maya arrived. In addition to Janet, Sandra Mitchell sat across from Dr. Hayes, who looked distinctly uncomfortable. Most surprising of all, Rebecca Carter sat in the corner with a union representative, her usually confident demeanor replaced by obvious anxiety. Ms. Rodriguez, please have a seat, Janet said, gesturing to an empty chair. Thank you for coming in. We've completed our investigation into the incidents involving you and several members of our nursing staff. Maya sat down, noticing that Rebecca refused to make eye contact. Sandra Mitchell looked embarrassed, while Dr. Hayes seemed genuinely surprised by whatever they had discovered. First, I want to apologize, Janet continued. The security footage from the storage room incident tells a very different story than what was reported to us. We clearly see 4 nurses cornering you, destroying your uniform, and physically assaulting you. Your response, while forceful, was clearly self-defense. Maya felt a wave of relief wash over her, but Janet wasn't finished. More troubling is what we discovered when we expanded our investigation. Miss Carter has a documented history of similar behavior at her previous hospital, information that was not properly communicated during her hiring process. We also found evidence that she and her colleagues coordinated false statements to file against you. Sandra Mitchell spoke for the first time. Maya, I owe you an apology. I should have investigated more thoroughly before suspending you. The nursing department failed you, and I take full responsibility for that. Dr. Hayes leaned forward. What's particularly concerning is that this happened to one of our most promising new hires. Your patient care has been exemplary, and several doctors have specifically requested to work with you. Rebecca finally looked up, her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. This is ridiculous, she said. She attacked us unprovoked. The camera doesn't show what led up to, Ms. Carter, Janet interrupted firmly. The camera shows you and 3 colleagues surrounding Ms. Rodriguez, destroying her property and physically assaulting her. Your story about being threatened by her has been completely contradicted by the evidence. The union representative whispered something to Rebecca, who slumped back in her chair looking defeated. Janet turned back to Maya. Ms. Rodriguez, St. Catherine's would like to offer you full reinstatement with back pay. We're also implementing additional harassment training for all staff members and creating clearer protocols for reporting workplace conflicts. Maya felt vindicated but also sad that it had taken video evidence to be believed. What about the other nurses involved? Miss Carter is being terminated immediately for filing false reports and workplace harassment. The other 3 nurses are receiving written warnings and mandatory counseling. Any future incidents will result in immediate termination. Rebecca stood up abruptly. This is insane. She's a violent person who doesn't belong in a hospital setting. Maya had remained silent through most of the meeting, but Rebecca's final attack pushed her to respond. The only violence in that storage room came from you and your friends. I defended myself when you left me no choice. You could have seriously injured someone, Rebecca shot back. Maya met her eyes directly. I controlled my response. If I had wanted to seriously injure any of you, you would have required medical attention. Instead, you walked out of that room under your own power. The truth of that statement hung in the air. Maya's restraint had actually prevented more serious consequences, something that her boxing training had taught her. Knowing when not to use full force was often more important than knowing how to use it. Dr. Hayes addressed Maya directly. We'd like you to return to work tomorrow if you're willing. You'll be assigned to work directly with our trauma team, which I believe better matches your skills and temperament. Maya nodded. I'd like that very much. As the meeting concluded, Rebecca was escorted out by security while the union representative gathered her belongings. Maya watched her leave, feeling no satisfaction in the woman's downfall. Rebecca's behavior had likely stemmed from her own insecurities and fears, but that didn't excuse the harm she had caused. Sandra approached Maya as the room emptied. I hope you can forgive an old supervisor for not seeing the truth sooner. I've been doing this job for 20 years, and I should have known better. Maya felt a strange mixture of emotions. Part of her was satisfied that Rebecca was facing consequences for her actions, but another part felt sympathy for someone whose career had been damaged by her own poor choices. Did she seem like she had learned anything from what happened? Maya asked. Hard to say. She claimed she had undergone anger management counseling and wanted to make amends. Whether that's genuine or just what she thinks we want to hear. Dr. Hayes shrugged. Time will tell. That afternoon, Maya made her decision about the director position. She found Dr. Hayes reviewing patient charts and asked for a private conversation. I'll take the position, Maya said without preamble. But I have some conditions. Dr. Hayes looked up with interest. I'm listening. First, I want to maintain at least 50% clinical duties. I became a nurse to help patients, and I don't want to lose that connection. Second, I want the authority to implement real changes, not just write policies that sit in filing cabinets. Granted on both counts. What else? I want to establish a peer support network for staff who face harassment. Sometimes people need to talk to someone who's been through similar experiences, not just an HR representative reading from a policy manual. Dr. Hayes smiled. I think that's an excellent idea. The board will be very pleased with your acceptance. As Maya walked through the emergency department that evening, she noticed the subtle but significant changes that had occurred over the past 6 months. Conversations between staff members were more collegial. New employees were welcomed rather than hazed, and there was a general atmosphere of mutual respect that hadn't existed during her first week. Jessica Shun approached her as she was preparing to leave. Maya, I wanted to thank you for today. Those nurses haven't bothered me since our conversation this morning. Good, Maya replied. But remember, if anyone ever does give you trouble, don't handle it alone. Use the resources available to you. Actually, Jessica said, I was wondering if you'd be willing to teach some self-defense classes for hospital staff. I know you have a background in martial arts, and I think a lot of people would feel more confident if they knew how to protect themselves. Maya considered the suggestion. Teaching self-defense would be another way to empower her colleagues, though she would need to be careful about how it was presented. The goal would be confidence and safety, not creating a hospital full of fighters. Let me think about it, Maya said. There might be a way to incorporate that into the new safety program. As Maya drove home, she realized that her journey from boxer to nurse to workplace advocate had come full circle. She had started her career at St. Catherine's wanting to help people heal, and now she was doing that on multiple levels, treating patients, mentoring colleagues, and creating systemic changes that would protect future employees. Her phone rang as she pulled into her apartment complex. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. Maya Rodriguez? This is Dr. Patricia Anderson from the American Nurses Association. We've been following the workplace safety initiatives at St. Catherine's, and we'd like to invite you to testify before a congressional subcommittee about healthcare workplace violence. Maya felt a surge of excitement mixed with nervousness. Testify before Congress? The healthcare industry has a serious problem with workplace harassment and violence. Your experience and the solutions you've helped implement could influence national policy. Would you be interested? Maya thought about all the nurses across the country who might be facing situations similar to what she had endured. If her story could help create better protections for healthcare workers nationally, it would be worth stepping into the spotlight. Yes, Maya said without hesitation. I'd be honored to help. As she hung up the phone, Maya realized that her fight was far from over. It was just expanding to a much bigger arena. But she had learned that the most important victories weren't won with fists. They were won with courage, persistence, and the determination to stand up for what was right. Maya Rodriguez had found her calling, and it was bigger than she had ever imagined. 3 months after accepting the director position, Maya found herself in Washington, D.C., sitting in a congressional hearing room that felt more intimidating than any boxing ring she had ever entered. The mahogany-paneled chamber buzzed with activity as senators, staff members, and fellow witnesses prepared for the Healthcare Worker Safety Subcommittee hearing. Maya adjusted her navy blue blazer and reviewed her prepared statement one final time. Beside her sat Dr. Michael Chun, a trauma surgeon from Chicago who had been assaulted by a patient's family member, and Sarah Martinez, a nurse from Phoenix whose career had ended after workplace harassment drove her to a nervous breakdown. They represented the human cost of healthcare workplace violence that statistics alone couldn't convey. Senator Catherine Walsh, the subcommittee chairwoman, called the hearing to order. Today we examine a crisis that threatens our healthcare System from within. Workplace violence and harassment that drives qualified professionals from their calling and puts patient care at risk. Maya's testimony was scheduled third, giving her time to observe the political theater while fighting off nerves. Dr. Chun spoke powerfully about physical violence against healthcare workers, citing statistics that showed nurses were 3 times more likely to experience workplace violence than any other profession. Sarah Martinez's testimony was harder to hear. She described years of systematic harassment that hospital administration had ignored, ultimately forcing her to leave nursing entirely. Her voice broke as she explained how her passion for helping patients had been destroyed by colleagues who saw her as a threat rather than an ally. When Senator Walsh called Maya's name, she approached the witness table with the same focused calm she had once brought to championship fights. The room fell silent as she began speaking, her voice clear and confident despite the gravity of the moment. Senators, my name is Maya Rodriguez, and I am the Director of Workplace Safety and Mentorship at St. Catherine's Medical Center. But before I held that position, I was a victim of the very harassment we're discussing today. Maya recounted her first day at the hospital, the storage room confrontation, and the subsequent false accusations. She spoke about the pattern of behavior that had driven away qualified nurses and created a toxic environment that ultimately hurt patient care. What saved my career wasn't the hospital's initial response, Maya continued. It was the courage to document everything, demand a real investigation, and refuse to be silently pushed out. But not every healthcare worker has the background or resources to fight back effectively. Senator James Morrison, a former prosecutor, leaned forward with interest. Ms. Rodriguez, you mentioned having a background that helped you handle this situation. Can you elaborate? Maya had prepared for this question but still felt a moment of hesitation. Her boxing career wasn't relevant to most nursing discussions, but here it was central to understanding how she had survived her ordeal. Before becoming a nurse, I was a professional boxer ranked 4th in my division. That background taught me to stay calm under pressure, analyze threats strategically, and most importantly, that backing down from bullies only makes them more aggressive. The committee members exchanged glances. This wasn't the typical testimony they usually heard from healthcare workers. Are you suggesting healthcare workers should fight back physically? Senator Morrison asked, clearly concerned about the implications. Absolutely not, Maya replied firmly. What I'm suggesting is that we train healthcare workers to recognize harassment patterns, document incidents properly, and use institutional resources effectively. Physical confrontation should always be a last resort for self-defense only. Senator Walsh nodded approvingly. Tell us about the changes you've implemented at St. Catherine's. Maya outlined the comprehensive workplace safety program they had developed: mandatory harassment training, anonymous reporting systems, peer support networks, and most importantly, real consequences for perpetrators. She presented data showing dramatic improvements in employee retention, job satisfaction, and patient satisfaction scores. The key insight, Maya explained, is that workplace harassment isn't just a personnel issue, it's a patient safety issue. When nurses are stressed, intimidated, or afraid to speak up, patients suffer. Creating a respectful workplace environment is literally a matter of life and death. During the question period, Senator Rebecca Foster from Texas asked about the economic impact of the program. Maya was ready with numbers that spoke the language politicians understood. Senator, the cost of implementing our workplace safety program was approximately $200,000 annually. The savings from reduced turnover, decreased recruitment costs, and fewer liability claims exceeded $1.2 million in the first year alone. Good workplace culture isn't just morally right, it's financially smart. After the hearing, Maya was approached by Dr. Lisa Thompson from the Department of Health and Human Services. Ms. Rodriguez, would you be interested in consulting on A national workplace safety initiative? We're developing federal guidelines for healthcare institutions. Maya felt the weight of opportunity and responsibility. I'd be honored to contribute, but I have one condition. Any guidelines we develop must be created with input from frontline healthcare workers, not just administrators and policy experts. Agreed. We need authentic voices like yours to make this work. That evening, Maya sat in her hotel room overlooking the Capitol, video calling Carlos to share the day's events. Her brother's face beamed with pride as she described her testimony. "I watched the live stream," Carlos said. "You were incredible. Mom and Dad would be so proud of what you've accomplished." Maya felt emotional thinking about their parents, who had died in a car accident when she was 18. They had always believed in using their talents to help others, and she finally felt like she was living up to their values. "The crazy thing is," Maya said, "I never could have imagined this path when I was boxing. Every punch I threw, every strategy I learned somehow prepared me for this moment." "That's because you were always a fighter for justice," Carlos replied. Boxing was just the first arena. The next morning brought an unexpected encounter at Reagan National Airport. While waiting for her flight back home, Maya noticed a commotion near the security checkpoint. A young woman in medical scrubs was being loudly berated by an older man in expensive suit. "You people don't know what you're doing," the man shouted. "I want a real doctor, not some kid who probably got her degree from a community college." The young woman, whose badge identified her as Dr. Amanda Brooks, maintained professional composure despite the public humiliation. But Maya could see the familiar signs of someone being systematically undermined and intimidated. Maya approached calmly. "Excuse me, is there a problem here?" The man turned his aggression toward Maya. "Yeah, there's a problem. This so-called doctor doesn't know anything. And I'm not letting some incompetent treat my wife." Maya looked at Dr. Brooks, who appeared to be in her late 20s with the exhausted look of a resident working impossible hours. "Doctor, what's the medical situation?" The gentleman's wife had chest pains during their flight, Dr. Brooks explained professionally. "I recommended she be evaluated at the nearest emergency department, but he's refusing." Maya nodded, then addressed the hostile man with the calm authority she had perfected over months of workplace interventions. "Sir, Dr. Brooks has given you sound medical advice. Chest pain in a 60-year-old woman requires immediate evaluation. Would you rather trust a qualified physician or risk your wife's life because of your ego?" The man's face reddened. "Who are you two?" "I'm Maya Rodriguez, Director of Workplace Safety at St. Catherine's Medical Center, and a registered nurse with 6 years of emergency medicine experience. Dr. Brooks' recommendation is exactly what any competent medical professional would make." The authority in Maya's voice, combined with her specific credentials, deflated the man's bluster. Other travelers had stopped to watch the confrontation, and he was clearly uncomfortable being the center of negative attention. "Fine," he muttered. "But if she's wrong, double quotes, she's not," Maya said firmly. "And Dr. Brooks, don't let anyone make you doubt your training or expertise. You handled the situation exactly right." As the man walked away to arrange transportation for his wife, Dr. Brooks looked at Maya with gratitude and curiosity. "Thank you for stepping in. How did you know what to say?" Maya smiled. "Unfortunately, I've had a lot of practice dealing with people who think they can intimidate healthcare workers. The key is projecting confidence and backing it up with facts. I feel like I should know how to handle situations like this better," Dr. Brooks admitted. "Medical school doesn't really prepare you for psychological warfare." Maya handed her a business card. "If you're ever interested, I run workshops on workplace safety and conflict resolution for healthcare workers. We're expanding the program nationally." Dr. Brooks studied the card. "I might take you up on that. It seems like every day brings a new challenge that has nothing to do with medicine." "That's exactly why this training is so important," Maya replied. The better we get at handling non-medical conflicts, the more energy we can devote to actually healing people. As Maya boarded her flight home, she reflected on how her mission had evolved. What had started as a personal survival strategy had become a national movement. From a storage room confrontation to congressional testimony to airport interventions, she was using her unique combination of skills to protect healthcare workers across the country. Her phone buzzed with a text from Janet Williams at St. Catherine's. 3 more hospitals have requested training consultations based on your congressional testimony. I think we're going to need a bigger team. Maya smiled as she settled into her seat. The fight against workplace harassment in healthcare was far from over, but momentum was building. Every nurse who stood up to a bully, every hospital that implemented better policies, every administrator who took complaints seriously, was a victory in a war that mattered more than any championship belt. As the plane lifted off, Maya looked down at the lights of Washington, D.C., and thought about all the healthcare workers across the country who were fighting their own battles against harassment and intimidation. They might not have her boxing background, but they could learn the same lessons she had, that standing up to bullies was not just possible, but necessary, and that individual courage could create systemic change. The girl who had once been afraid of workplace bullies was now leading a national movement to protect others from the same fate. Maya Rodriguez had found her true calling, and she was just getting started. 2 years after her congressional testimony, Maya Rodriguez stood before an audience of 3,000 healthcare professionals at the National Healthcare Safety Summit in Las Vegas. The convention center buzzed with energy as nurses, doctors, administrators, and policymakers from across the globe gathered to share strategies for creating safer workplace environments. Maya's keynote address was the culminating event of a conference that had grown beyond anyone's expectations. What started as a small initiative at St. Catherine's had sparked a movement that was reshaping healthcare culture worldwide. When I walked into St. Catherine's Medical Center for the first time, Maya began, her voice carrying clearly through the massive auditorium, I thought my biggest challenge would be learning to start IVs on difficult patients. I never imagined I'd have to fight for the basic right to do my job without being harassed and intimidated. The audience was silent, hanging on every word. Maya's story had become legendary in healthcare circles, but hearing her tell it in person carried a power that videos and articles couldn't convey. Today, I want to share some remarkable news with you. Last month, President Williams signed the Healthcare Worker Protection Act into federal law. This legislation, which many of you helped advocate for, establishes minimum safety standards for all healthcare institutions receiving federal funding. The auditorium erupted in thunderous applause. Maya paused, feeling the weight of this historic moment. The law she had helped draft would protect millions of healthcare workers and ultimately improve patient care across the nation. But laws alone don't change culture, Maya continued as the applause died down. Real change happens when individuals like you decide that enough is enough, that healthcare workers deserve respect, and that patients benefit when we create environments where everyone can do their best work. In the front row, Maya spotted several familiar faces. Dr. Hayes sat beaming with pride, having been promoted to Chief Medical Officer, partly due to St. Catherine's reputation as a model workplace. Janet Williams had become a national expert on healthcare HR policy. Even Jessica Chen was there, now running her own mentorship program for new nurses in California. But the most meaningful presence was Carlos, who had flown in from their hometown to hear his sister's keynote address. His battle with leukemia was a distant memory now, and he had become a successful teacher, inspired by Maya's example of using personal challenges to help others. As Maya concluded her prepared remarks, she decided to share something she hadn't planned to discuss publicly. Before I take your questions, I want to tell you about a phone call I received last week. It was from Rebecca Carter, the nurse whose harassment started my journey into workplace advocacy. The audience stirred with interest. Rebecca's story had become part of Maya's narrative, but few people knew what had happened to her after her termination. Rebecca called to tell me that she had been accepted into a graduate program for healthcare administration, specializing in workplace culture and conflict resolution. She wanted to thank me for not destroying her career permanently and to apologize for the harm she caused not just to me, but to other nurses whose stories we may never know. Maya paused, choosing her words carefully. I share this not to absolve Rebecca of responsibility for her actions, but to illustrate something important. People can change, systems can change, culture can change, but only if we have the courage to confront problems honestly and work toward real solutions. During the question period, a young nurse from Detroit stood up. Ms. Rodriguez, I'm facing a situation similar to what you experienced. My supervisor has been making my life miserable, and I'm thinking about leaving nursing altogether. What would you do in my position? Maya felt the familiar surge of protective instinct that had driven her advocacy work. First, document everything. Dates, times, witnesses, specific incidents. Second, use your institution's reporting mechanisms, but don't rely on them exclusively. Third, find allies. Other nurses who've witnessed the behavior or experienced it themselves. She paused, making eye contact with the young woman. But most importantly, remember that you have value, your skills matter, and patients need good nurses like you. Don't let one toxic person drive you away from a profession that makes a real difference in the world. The nurse nodded, tears in her eyes, and Maya knew that conversation alone made the entire conference worthwhile. After the keynote, Maya was surrounded by attendees sharing their own stories and requesting guidance. A hospital CEO from Denver wanted to implement St. Catherine's model system-wide. A nursing school dean asked about incorporating workplace safety training into their curriculum. A policy researcher requested data for an international study on healthcare workplace violence. During a brief break, Maya stepped outside the convention center to call Carlos. The Las Vegas Strip glittered in the evening light, a surreal backdrop for reflection on how far she'd come. How did it feel up there? Carlos asked when he answered. Like everything finally made sense, Maya replied. All the boxing matches, all the studying, all the late nights in the hospital, it was all leading to this moment. Mom and Dad would be so proud, Carlos said softly. You've turned your pain into purpose. That evening, the conference organizers hosted an awards ceremony recognizing individuals and institutions that had made significant contributions to healthcare worker safety. Maya was honored with the inaugural Champion of Change Award, but she used her acceptance speech to recognize the countless others who had shared their stories and fought for systemic reform. This award belongs to every nurse who refused to accept harassment as just part of the job, Maya said, holding the crystal trophy. It belongs to every administrator who chose to investigate complaints seriously rather than sweep them under the rug. It belongs to every doctor who stood up for colleagues and every patient who recognized that treating healthcare workers with respect improves their own care. The next morning, Maya visited St. Catherine's before flying home. Walking through the emergency department felt like returning to a different world from the one she'd first entered. The atmosphere was collegial and professional, with none of the underlying tension that had characterized her early days. In the trauma bay, where she'd once assisted Dr. Thompson with Danny Morrison's life-saving surgery, Maya found a new nurse, completing her first week. The young woman looked confident and supported, working alongside colleagues who treated her as a valued team member rather than an unwelcome intruder. Sandra Mitchell, now retired but visiting as a volunteer, approached Maya with a knowing smile. Remember when you were the new girl everyone was talking about? How could I forget? Maya laughed. Though I hear the conversations about new nurses are quite different these days. Night and day, Sandra confirmed. We've got a waiting list of nurses wanting to work here. Funny how treating people with respect makes you an employer of choice. Maya's final stop was the storage room where her transformation had begun. The small space had been converted into a meditation and wellness room for staff, complete with comfortable seating and inspirational quotes about resilience and healing. A small plaque on the wall read, "Dedicated to all healthcare workers who refuse to accept less than the respect they deserve." As Maya prepared to leave, Dr. Hayes found her in the parking lot. "Before you go, I wanted to share some news. The hospital board has approved funding for the Maya Rodriguez Center for Healthcare Worker Excellence. It will provide training, research, and advocacy support for healthcare institutions nationwide." Maya felt overwhelmed by the honor, but also by the responsibility it represented. "Dr. Hayes, I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep fighting for the changes our profession needs. Your voice has become essential to this movement." On the flight home, Maya reviewed emails from hospitals around the world requesting consultation on workplace safety programs. Invitations to speak at conferences in London, Tokyo, and Sydney filled her inbox. Publishers wanted her to write a book about her experience. Documentary filmmakers sought to tell her story, but the message that meant the most came from Jessica Chun. "Maya wanted you to know that we just successfully implemented a peer support program at our hospital using your model. 3 nurses who were considering leaving the profession have decided to stay. Thank you for showing us that one person really can make a difference." As the plane descended toward her home city, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her from a boxing ring to a congressional hearing room to a convention center stage. She had learned that the skills that made her a champion fighter, discipline, strategy, resilience, and the refusal to back down from a challenge, were exactly the skills needed to create lasting change in the world. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Ms. Rodriguez, I'm a nursing student who heard your keynote address online. I was considering dropping out after a bad clinical experience, but your story inspired me to keep going. Thank you for fighting for people like me." Maya smiled, saving the message alongside hundreds of similar notes she'd received over the years. Each one reminded her why the fight was worth it, why standing up to bullies in a storage room had been about more than just personal survival. Maya Rodriguez had discovered that sometimes the most important battles aren't fought in arenas with cheering crowds and championship belts. Sometimes they're fought in hospital hallways and conference rooms and congressional hearings, where the prize isn't personal glory, but the chance to make the world a little safer, a little kinder, and a little more just for the people who dedicate their lives to healing others. The boxer had become a healer, the victim had become a champion, and the woman who once just wanted to help patients had learned that sometimes helping patients means changing the entire system they're treated in. As Maya looked out the airplane window at the lights of her city below, she knew her story was far from over. There were still battles to fight, still changes to make, still people to protect. But she had learned something her boxing coaches never taught her. The most satisfying victories are the ones that make it possible for others to win their own fights. Maya Rodriguez had found her true calling, and the world was better for it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.